Hello everyone, Randy here. So I just wanted to make this video. I've been reflecting on what I've been learning, and I want to bring further awareness to the fastest growing criminal enterprise of the world, and that is human trafficking. I really want to get involved in the prevention and awareness aspect of the fight against human trafficking, and I thought that doing it at a local level would be excellent. I didn't want to be sitting by anymore, just hearing about these terrible things happening and not doing anything about it. I really believe that we all have a vital role to play, and we all have talents that we could be using to really put an end to modern day slavery. So by doing this video today, I hope that you have a clear definition of what human trafficking is, and I also want to dispel some of the myths that surround human trafficking. They don't do anything good for the fight. They bring forth confusion and stigma that makes it harder to get people out there and utilizing their voice to really bring forth change. So I wanted to do that. And I also wanted to note that I am not an expert by any means. I just have been using my internet access to learn more on my own time because I think this is so important. And I really hope that you do too, and you use your internet access because we have so much information. We have unlimited information at our fingertips that we could be utilizing so that we are productive and we learn more, and hopefully we put this knowledge into action so that we can prevent this crime from happening altogether. So I'm so glad that you're listening, and let's just jump right in. So here's a definition of human trafficking. I'm going to be referring to my notes over here just because my memory is really bad and I want to make sure that I touch on everything that I want to touch on. So, human trafficking involves the use of force, coercion, or fraud to lure victims and force them into labor or commercial sexual exploitation. One of the myths is human trafficking involves some form of travel or transportation across borders. That's false. In fact, human trafficking does not require movement or border crossing whatsoever. Another myth. Since human trafficking is a global problem, there's nothing I can do. That couldn't be more false. Like I said, everybody plays a vital role, whether you realize it or not. You really have something to offer to this fight. So human trafficking has been reported in every single state here in the US. We need to know the signs of human trafficking, and we need to look beneath the surface. This is a hidden crime, but we can really bring awareness to this and shine a light on the darkness. This is happening here in Wisconsin, so much so that all of the counties in Wisconsin, all 72 of them, have reported cases of human trafficking, and 80% of them are sex trafficking. Another myth is that victims must be held against their will using some sort of bondage or physical restraint. I think that this is like a big, big misconception. So while some traffickers physically hold the people they exploit, it's more common for them to use psychological means of control and entrapment. And this is where it gets really complex. And what I've been learning is how trauma affects the brain. I've been researching a little bit of that, and it kind of fascinates me for multiple reasons. And it needs to be noted that when the brain is subjected to trauma, it changes the brain. The brain is never the same again after that. So, like I said, it's more common for traffickers to use psychological means of control and entrapment. However, they sometimes do use physical means as well. They might use fear, drug addiction, threats against family members, and a lack of options due to poverty and homelessness can all prevent someone from leaving their trafficking situation. Some traffickers use more subtle methods of trapping and controlling their victims, such as isolating victims from family members and friends, and limiting their public contact with the outside world. They make sure that all their contact is closely monitored. They also may confiscate passports or other very important identification documents. They threaten to shame their victims by exposing humiliating circumstances to their family or friends or whomever. They might threaten imprisonment or deportation by telling their victims that they're going to report them to the authorities. And there's also something called debt bondage. And from my understanding, they use this enormous financial obligation that they, kind of brainwash the victim into believing that they owe to their trafficker. So, for instance, I read this little story about a survivor who was subjected to trafficking, and her parents died in a natural disaster. This was in a foreign country, and all of a sudden she's got to care for like 6 younger siblings. So somebody comes to her with a job offer, and this happens a lot. And they claim, it's going to be so great, and they offer the travel arrangements, and so she gets where she needs to be for the job after they arranged everything for her. And then all of a sudden, they're telling her that she owes all this travel fare and all these other expenses. So right off the bat, there's debt bondage, and then the victims think that they need to work in order to pay off this debt, which they never will. It's another means of entrapment. So another myth is that victims will be desperate to escape. They will ask for help when they need it. And that's false a lot of the time. Individuals who experience trafficking may not readily seek help due to a number of factors. So these are some of the factors: self-blame, fear, or even specific instructions from their traffickers regarding how to behave when interacting with others. They also do not identify as a human trafficking victim, and they may not realize that they even have rights. Another myth: if someone is paid or consented to be in their initial situation, it's not trafficking. That is false. It doesn't matter if the initial consent was there, whether it be a sex act or labor. It can easily turn into a commercial sex act or forced labor. So even if, the consent was there before the force, fraud, or coercion, it is not relevant to the trafficking situation. So it's very important to note that. Another myth: human trafficking is the same as human smuggling. Human trafficking and human smuggling are not the same, and they are distinct under federal law. They're different. So human smuggling refers to an illegal border crossing, while human trafficking involves commercial sex acts or forced labor that are induced through force, fraud, or coercion. And this is regardless of if transportation occurs or not. Another myth is that human trafficking is the same or is just sex trafficking. That's false. In fact, human trafficking also includes labor trafficking, which involves children and adults, and they're compelled to perform labor or services by force, fraud, or coercion. Another myth: only women can experience human trafficking. That's false. Anyone can, including men. Traffickers prey on the vulnerable. often with promises of a better life. Risk factors include prior history of abuse or sexual violence, generational trauma, poverty, unemployment, and unstable living situations or homelessness all contribute to these vulnerabilities. And I think it's really important to note that with the pandemic and the instability that a lot of people are experiencing, a lot of people are falling on hard times. Traffickers are going to use that to their advantage. They're going to innovate and they're going to capitalize on this chaos that is happening. So we need to remain vigilant, and this is so important that we need to be sharing this information, getting it out there, and making sure people are aware of all of this. And again, research, get out there and be a voice for these people. Again, anyone can fall victim to this as we're learning. So, a couple resources that I found really helpful that you can really get trained and understand the signs and some more facts about human trafficking. One website is OUR Rescue, RESCUE.org, and that's a global and national organization. It actually was founded by someone who was Homeland Security, and he left his government job to do this full time, and people thought that he was crazy, and they do these sting operations and bust all these human trafficking rings. So that's really great. They offer a free training session, and it's about 1 hour. You can even break it up if you don't have an hour, and by the end of that you will have a certificate that says that you are trained on the signs, so you know what to look for when you're out in public. You need to really be aware when you're out in public, because this stuff is out there, and a lot of the time people aren't even noticing it because they just don't know what to look for. They don't. And they really Operation Underground Railroad, they really explain the 3 letters of their organization, which is OUR. So O is for observe. So if you see a suspicious situation, you observe everything about it. The person who you might assume is the victim, and then maybe they're accompanied with their trafficker. They really go into detail about the things to look for so that you can identify that situation. And then the U is speak up, and they tell you about ways that you can speak up. Sometimes you're going to be able to address the victim and ask specific questions to gain a better understanding of if this really is a human trafficking situation. And sometimes you might not want to intervene at all and then go ahead and report. That's the R in OUR, and report to your local law enforcement. Explain your concerns, talk about your gut feeling, because your gut feeling is a lot of the times right, and you never know what kind of impact you could be having. You could be saving someone's life. So that's OURrescue.org. Definitely go on there, check it out, do the training session. It's the very least that you could do. And then I also want to share the human trafficking hotline. It's 1-888-373-7888. That's 1-888-373-7888. And I actually added that into my contacts. The OUR training told me to do that, and I thought that was great. I actually wanted to have everyone do it when we had our event a couple weeks back, but I forgot. The nerves got to me when I was speaking. And just add that into your contacts so you always have it readily available in case there is an instance where you can sneak it to somebody who you might assume is a victim of human trafficking. And you never know, you could be giving them the courage to come forward. So I just wanted to touch on a couple more things. So I thought this was really interesting. It's called the TIP report, and it's a United States report, and they actually hold a lot of other countries accountable on how they're reacting to human trafficking and what they're doing in prevention and what resources they are giving to victims. And they do a report every year. So this is some stuff that I found in there that I thought was very interesting, and that's just www.state.gov where I found some of this stuff. So their whole thing is they say we must do more to bring criminals to justice and help victims rebuild their lives. And something I found very interesting is this concept of trauma bonding. So I found this on the website. I'm going to read it. It says, in human trafficking cases, the relationship between victim and trafficker may involve trauma bonding, a phenomenon that is beginning to receive increased attention. And as soon as I heard that, I thought of this right away. In research of this topic, trauma bonding is commonly referred to as Stockholm Syndrome. And I know that some people hate this concept, and I want to apologize if you don't agree that it's a real thing, but I really was interested in learning about it and the relationship that it has with the brain. So I'm just going to go a little more in detail about that. I'm sorry if anyone finds that offensive. The terms may be used interchangeably. However, there is no medical standard for diagnosis, nor does anyone agree on a definition of trauma bonding. In addition, there is no definite understanding of trauma bonding's prevalence within trafficking situation, and not all victims experience it. So, although the definitions vary, the most common meaning of trauma bonding in human trafficking is when a trafficker uses rewards and punishments within cycles of abuse to foster a powerful emotional connection with the victim. Traffickers take a role as protector to maintain their control, create confusion, and develop a connection or attachment which may include a victim feeling a sense of loyalty or love for their trafficker. This traumatic bond becomes intense when fear of the trafficker is paired with gratitude for any kindness that is shown by the trafficker. Additionally, trauma bonding in cases of human trafficking may occur within familial relationships in which the perpetrator could even be a parent. I think that's something that really needs to be noted. There are parents who sell their kids into slavery. There's no way of putting it any differently. That is what is happening. A lot of people think, you have to worry more so about someone coming and snatching your kid, because a lot of parents can't fathom a parent doing that to their child. But this evil exists in all corners, and we have to be made aware that this is happening. And this, they've found, trauma bonding can occur in relationships among family members who are the traffickers when it comes to trafficking. So when we're talking about trauma bonding, we have to understand biology. So I thought this was really interesting too. To understand the complexities of trauma bonding in human trafficking, it is critical to understand the biological impact of trauma. The foundations of trauma bonding are laid at the neurobiological levels. So during a single incident of trauma, the limbic system in the brain, which is the brain's emotional center, overactivates. And the prefrontal cortex, which is the brain's logic center, shuts down. So in one incident of trauma, that's what happens in your brain. So imagine childhood trauma. And, years 1 through 6 are very, very vital. So if children are subjected to this kind of trauma, imagine what it does to their brain. And anyone's brain, for that matter. Children, adults, anyone. So repeated trauma exposure can negatively impact the brain's development and a way a person thinks, often resulting in the victim becoming numb and disconnected with themselves. Therefore, in order for them to feel something, it must be intense. So, traffickers abuse these repeated trauma exposures, and it may result in a victim returning to the abuse or the trafficker due to the intensity, familiarity, and routine provided by the relationship. At times, the relationship may decrease the psychological impact of the trauma, as moments of love and care from the trafficker offset experiences of fear. So, in these instances, that's what I meant by this is so complex. There's a lot to it, and survivors really need our support. They really do. They have been subjected to trauma that is irreversible, and we need to be a system of support so that they can rebuild their lives. I'm so passionate about this, and I think one of the main reasons is because I was a victim of childhood sexual abuse, and although that's a lot different than trafficking, I felt the rifts of the trauma that was accompanied by those circumstances. And it really does silence you. I mean, for over 10 years, I didn't tell anyone, and it ate me up. It really did. And as a kid, you really don't realize you were a victim until later on. I found that so the abuse happened when I was 3 to 4. So I didn't have any knowledge of sexual experience. So how would I know that I was just abused? So it had to come at a later time when I saw maybe a couple kissing or, became aware of some type of sexual experience, whether it be, like I said, a couple kissing at the park on a bench or something I caught in a movie. Once I started understanding what sexual experience is, then I realized I had been sexually abused. So sexual abuse as a child really is a lifelong consequence. It wasn't until I was an older child that I realized what had happened, and then after that came the shame and the embarrassment and the guilt, and I don't really know what was said to me by my abuser, but I didn't feel like I could tell my mom or whoever for whatever reason. And it gets you thinking, like, why didn't I ask for help? It's because it silences you. And we really need to be a voice for the people who are silenced, who are dehumanized, who are exploited in any way. And human trafficking is a crime against humanity, and we need to do something about it. Everybody plays a vital role. So thank you for watching this. I'm going to make more videos as I grow more knowledgeable about human trafficking, and I really, really hope that you guys do too. Do your research, and let's get the conversation going about this. Let's get involved in any local efforts, and let's really, really make a difference. Thanks, you guys.